BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? I hope everyone had a good weekend. Just a couple of quick announcements and reminders before we truly begin. The first is that some of you may have noticed that there was a brief hiatus for Black Box Online Radio, but right now I'm hoping that the episodes will be coming out to you regularly. Not only the original lineup, but also more YouTube shorts that will be here on the channel. And the reason for the hiatus was I was on the move. As almost all of you know, I started out in West Virginia, and for the past 2 years I've been going back and forth between West Virginia and Boston, Massachusetts. I was most recently in Boston, but I have decided to relocate once again, and I am now in the Philippines, in the city of Cebu, the Queen City of the South. So there are some challenges recording in the Philippines. It's not my first time here. Perhaps some of you will remember the chickens in the background, sometimes barking dogs, sometimes passing motorcyclists. So I've been trying to do my best to eliminate all of those problems. And this episode is going to be done a little bit differently. I had a 20-minute segment that I recorded in between packing suitcases. I literally mean that in between the packing of suitcases, I was able to throw together some comments about the Zodiac Killer mystery that I will share with you. And it's not just comments on my part, it's responding to your questions and comments from the section down below. Some things that were requested by you guys, as well as different material from other parts of YouTube, and I will play that for you in just a second. And at the end of the episode, I will talk to you guys about the future of Black Box Online Radio, as well as some additional aspects of the Zodiac Killer mystery. So without further ado, I would like to play the clip, and you're going to hear the intro again. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. But then it's going to just be a very brief segment, and I'm going to take the discussion in a bit of a different direction about halfway through. But, I mean, that's one of the benefits of doing a regular show about the Zodiac Killer every Monday, is we can explore this case from countless different angles, and I really look forward to reading more comments from you guys in the section down below, because you guys are a real cornerstone to this channel, everything that you contribute to the show and how the comments from the listeners get worked into BBOR. So please feel free to share something. I would love to know what you guys think. And now, welcome to Zodiac Monday. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? This is probably going to be a very short episode as opposed to the conventional format of Zodiac Monday, because I'm actually on the road right now, and as I said before, in October, there will be some types of metamorphoses with this channel, and Black Box Online Radio and Zodiac Monday will be coming out to you in a slightly different format. And also, there will be a return of Ripper Wednesday, talking about Jack the Ripper every Wednesday here on BBOR, and the Anything Goes Friday will return, and 2 new segments will be added, and of course the YouTube Shorts will be coming out periodically. So, if you want to follow along with all of these true crime discussions, I invite you to hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and you can also go through some of the links in the description box, including the one for BuyMeACoffee.com. BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNid88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout-out on Zodiac Monday. Now, in the past, I used to do something called suspect ratings. It was actually recommended to me by one of the followers of this program named Walter, and he said, why don't you rank some of the suspects in the Zodiac killer mystery on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of likelihood or probability of them being the Zodiac killer? And then that expanded into some of the unconfirmed crimes, ranking those cases on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of likelihood of having Zodiac relevance, or meaning that the Zodiac killer actually committed those crimes, going all the way back to the early 1960s and up into the 1970s was what the core focus of that. And you can find the first one under Zodiac Killer Suspect Ratings. It's an old black box recording here on this channel. But I wanted to use this as an opportunity to talk about some of these suspects whom I've only began discussing recently on this channel. The Zodiac Killer was a serial killer who operated in California in 1968 and 69. Whatever happened before or after that is anybody's guess, but there are definitely confirmed crimes that have been attributed to a single serial killer: the Lake Herman Road murders, the Blue Rock Springs shooting, the Lake Berryessa stabbing, and the murder of Paul Stein, who was a taxi driver killed on October 11th of 1969. Now, some of the suspects that I've had the opportunity to talk to you about recently were perhaps Joe Bevilacqua, as well as someone asked recently about John Parr Cox, and I've also been talking about a newer suspect named L.D. Hill, and I just want to go through them in order. Firstly, I devoted the majority of a recent Zodiac Killer news report to discussing Giuseppe Bevilacqua, who was commonly known as Joe Bevilacqua in America. He was an Italian-American, and on a scale of 1 to 10, we have to divide this into two segments. The first is that he was the Zodiac, and then the second is the full package theory involving Joe Bevilacqua, where he goes on from being the Zodiac to moving to Italy and becoming a serial killer called the Monster of Florence. Now, this is purely the theory of some guy named Francesco, but that has to be examined in two different ways. Because, number one, I actually am going to give Joe Bevilacqua about a 4 out of 10 in terms of likelihood of being the Zodiac killer, because he matches a lot of the physical descriptions: 5'8", 200 pounds. The Zodiac was also described by Mike Mageau as being 5'8", 195 to 200 pounds. He was someone who was ex-military, and also the timeline. The reason why the Zodiac crimes would have stopped would be because he left the country and was stationed in the military at a different location, but then goes on to just relocate to Italy, and that's why the Zodiac killer didn't commit homicides in the 1970s. But the Zodiac did mail letters, such as the 1974 Exorcist letter, but not committing murders. But there is also the full package theory that this guy Joe Bevilacqua went on to become the Monster of Florence, and he became a serial killer in Italy. That full package theory gets a 1 out of 10, only because 0 is not an option. The Monster of Florence was a serial killer who mutilated the pubic regions of some of the victims. Now, it's true the Monster of Florence did attack people in Lover's Lane style settings, but ultimately, any time there are these types of crimes where there's genital mutilation or intense sexual assault, or the term that is used with discussing the Monster of Florence is mutilating the pubic regions of the victim. So I think that it might actually be talking about the area right above the genitals. No matter what, I do not think that is Zodiac related. I do not think that there is anything to do with the Zodiac killer in those types of crimes. Now, rest in peace to the victims. I mean, they absolutely did not deserve to be murdered. Their stories have no less value just because they weren't killed by the Zodiac killer, but I just don't see any type of real Zodiac connection. Now, the next suspect I would like to talk to you about is L.D. Hill, and recently I began discussing him because I was contacted by two people, Thornton, Daniel Jeffrey, and Melissa Rose Tappa, and L.D. Hill is their suspect. He is someone who's going to be much higher on the list. He's going to start at an 8 out of 10. And I think the reasons why he's a stronger suspect than Joe Bevilacqua is because, firstly, we don't have to have this whole type of explanation about the Monster of Florence, and secondarily, he's also someone that would have easily had the brain to be the Zodiac Killer, and Melissa Rose Tappa has really gone through a very strong amount of, she put in a strong effort to try and arrange the timeline to make everything match up to her suspect, L.D. Hill. The Zodiac commits the first crime on December 20th of 1968, the Lake Herman Road murders. Then the Zodiac doesn't act again for 7 months, not until the Blue Rock Springs shooting on July 4th of 1969. Well, roughly 2.5, 3 weeks later, following the Lake Herman Road murders, L.D. Hill was stationed, well, he was deployed, he was sent off on the USS Enterprise, an aircraft carrier, and on January 14th of 1969, there was the famous fire on the USS Enterprise, and 28 servicemen died. Now, I've been discussing that with Melissa Rose Tappa, and I really wanted to find out, do you actually believe that L.D. Hill was responsible for the fire? Because there are several different possibilities. Number one, he was on the USS Enterprise and it was just an accident. The second is, he was responsible for the fire, but it was again an accident. I mean, the first one would mean he didn't have any involvement, he just had a type of coincidence that he was on board. The second is that he was responsible for the fire, it was an accident, and the third one was that it was deliberately caused by Dale Hill. And I'm going to do something much larger about that in the future, because I believe Melissa is of the mind that Dale Hill definitely started the fire deliberately, and that multiple servicemen died, and this is another piece of evidence that L.D. Hill, if he were the Zodiac Killer, would have used the number 37, the famous Zodiac Killer claiming 37 victims, 9 murders, and the 28 servicemen that died on the U.S. Enterprise in a fire. And then L.D. Hill returns to California on July 2nd of 1969, 2 days before the Blue Rock Springs shooting, and they've have all types of other clues about the dragon card, about the term secret pal was something that was used from L.D. Hill's hometown in Ohio, or his mother wrote about it in a newspaper, very similar to Secret Santa, but secret pals were something that they have, and the Zodiac would use the term secret pal on the Halloween card. He gets an 8 out of 10. Now, no one's going to get a perfect 10 out of 10 for being a suspect until we truly know who the Zodiac Killer is, but I think L.D. Hill is a strong suspect. Now, the next one that I would like to talk about is one that I've only briefly mentioned, and his name is Warren Earl Estes. Warren Earl Estes is the subject of the book Zodiac Cracked by Marianne Corfer, and he is going to be much lower on the suspect ratings, and he is only going to get a 3 out of 10. Warren Earl Estes was an astronomer that lived in Riverside, California. Riverside, California is where a possible Zodiac Killer crime took place, the 1966 murder of Sherry Jo Bates. And I confess, I did not find a photo of him online. There's some text about him, but he is previously stated as the subject of the book Zodiac Cracked, and it's this type of theory where he had to have been the murderer of Sherry Jo Bates, and Marianne Corfer's theory is contingent upon the Zodiac Killer murdering Sherry Jo Bates in Riverside, and I've stated for the longest time that I do not believe that the Zodiac Killer murdered Sherry Jo Bates. And I also do not like all of Marianne Corfer's points, particularly the one that Warren Earl Estes was an astronomer and he stole Paul Stein's glasses from the taxicab because he liked lenses, because astronomers like lenses, telescopes have lenses, and glasses have lenses. Number one, it's quite possible that the Zodiac Killer didn't even steal Paul Stein's glasses, but number two, I don't particularly care for that type of thinking. I don't particularly care for someone just be like, oh, well, these are lenses and those are lenses, therefore there's a Zodiac Killer connection. I think that that is just jumping to conclusions, rushing to conclusions, and I just don't think that that's a practical way of thinking to try and solve a murder mystery. So that's why Warren Earl Estes goes down to a 3 out of 10 on the suspect ratings. Now, the next suspect that I will talk about is one that was requested recently. I've mentioned an individual named John Parr Cox in some recent episodes. John Parr Cox was more or less a transportation executive, if you will. He worked for the Santa Fe Railroad, definitely one of the more prominent members of society, he is actually going to get a 4 out of 10. He is the subject of the YouTube channel Real Zodiac Killer Reveal, which is run by Adam, and Adam does a good job with that, and the reasons why he is getting this low rating, though, are a little bit complicated. Number one, he has some strong points in favor of him being the Zodiac. John Parcox had very similar handwriting. He had very very similar symbols that were used on a Santa Fe Railroad poster. And when I had the opportunity to discuss this suspect with Adam, he even talked about how he has a solution to the Z13 cipher where it's John P. Cox. P. Cox, meaning P for his middle initial, and signing his name with a period at the end. And Adam actually found an example of when John Parr Cox wrote out his name that way, in addition to his solution to the cipher, where he wrote his name John P. Cox. And I mean, there are reasons to think that John Parcox was the Zodiac Killer. The reason why he gets such a low rating is he was 6'4" and 240 pounds, and we do discuss this more in the in an interview that I did with Adam that will hopefully be released soon for the Zodiac Killer channel's interview with the expert series. I'm also the host of that program, but I just can't overlook the fact that this guy was 6'4", and I think the only way that Adam can continue his research into John Parcox is some way, somehow formulating some type of theory where, okay, maybe this guy wrote the letters, maybe this guy was involved with the planning, but to actually be the person who was described as we previously said, 5'8", 200 pounds. I mean, that's a lot of height to misjudge someone by. And I even have to give Adam credit as well. John Parcox does resemble what I call the colorized composite sketch of the Zodiac, not meaning that it's different than the black and white drawing, but when somebody colorized it and tried to make it age appropriate, I do think to John Parcox's appearance. But the height discrepancies, I mean, we're talking about witness sightings at 5 feet 8 inches tall, 5 feet 10 inches tall, and 6 feet tall, all considerably shorter than John Parcox. But if there is a suspect that you would like to hear about for future suspect ratings, or you would like to hear discussed on the channel that I haven't mentioned before in a previous episode, please feel free to put your idea in the comment section down below, and perhaps it can be worked into an episode of Zodiac Monday. Now for this next segment, I'm going to do something completely different. And this is going to be introduced in a roundabout way. Firstly, I was once listening to a show, and the host said that he was a medical doctor, and sometimes he finds YouTube videos that are very well worded, that are very articulate, and they're done in a very persuasive way. But because he's been to medical school, he knows that the information in the video is factually inaccurate. He knows that it's not true. And I watch a lot of YouTube videos. I watch a lot of different kinds of content, and I encountered this one channel that was talking about self-help for men and just talking about like masculine issues and such. And what the host said was, it doesn't matter what anyone thinks of you. It doesn't matter how anyone else sees you. It only matters what you think about yourself. And then everyone's like, oh, wow. And because I run a true crime channel where I talk to you guys about crime stories and particularly serial killers, I just know that that's a load of horse shit for the following reason. Look at the Zodiac Killer, for example. The Zodiac Killer is all about his own self-image. Some people even believe that the Zodiac Killer committed crimes in the first place to fuel his own self-image, and this gets frequently discussed in serial killer cases where they're acting like the serial killer thinks that his or her actions are justifiable because of some type of superiority issue, because of some type of, again, I hate to use the term over and over again, but self-image. They're just trying to fuel their own excitement, and they also believe that they have the right to do this because they are superior to the victims in some way. I mean, the Zodiac talked all about this, saying that he's just going to go hunt people for sport because he's smarter than everyone else, because he's cleverer than everyone else. The Zodiac couldn't spell, it was making fun of him for that. He was a serial killer. He doesn't deserve any credit for anything. But this whole idea that it's only what you think about yourself, I mean, people go on to become murderous and twisted psychopaths and sociopaths because of that type of thinking. And even beyond the Zodiac killer, we have another example, Rex Heuermann, who has been arrested for the Gilgo Beach murders, possibly could fit into this category because the Gilgo Beach murders are part of the Long Island serial killer story, and the later crimes are referred to as the Gilgo Beach murders, even though um, it's a complicated story. At first, there were two possible sets of homicides. The earlier ones were attributed to a serial killer called the Maynardville Butcher, and then the later the part of the crimes are the Gilgo Four murders, let's just call them that, and the entire thing was thought to have been one serial killer called the Long Island serial killer. Now, it only appears that Rex Heuermann has been charged with the final four murders, and I don't even want to mistake something because the news is still coming out about that. But when I would read psychological profiles of the Long Island serial killer, all the time you would hear something about how this person believes that he has the right to murder these women. And the Long Island serial killer victims were sex workers, escorts, and of similar professions, whatever term you would like to use. And what you would find is that people were thinking that the Long Island serial killer felt that his actions were justified because he viewed them as low class or he viewed them as inferior. And you would see this almost word for word, like in multiple different posts. This killer probably thinks that he has the right to murder these women because he is above them. This whole thing about it only matters what you think about you, not when you go on to become a murderous scumbag like the Zodiac killer or the Long Island serial killer. And I also heard something else in a different video that was put out by an individual named Julian Blanc on the YouTube channel Julian himself. And what he's telling a group of men is try to act like you're the star of your own movie. Try to act like a character in your movie. And imagine the people around you are audience members watching you in a movie. And again, the crowd is like, oh, wow. And I was just like, that is just terrible advice. I did that for 8 years. I'm not joking with you. I did that for 8 years, from the age of 16 to 24. That's just how I would act in social situations. I would act like I was a character on a TV show and act like I was a character in a movie. And I've talked about this a little bit before because I would watch lots of independent films and BBC America, and no one else in my social circle would follow those things, so I would often end up acting like the characters in the movie and actually try to act like I was performing and those people are in the audience, and you will just make people uncomfortable. You're just gonna bother people if you act like that, because what a lot of people don't understand is so many things in humor are related to not only likability, but also awkward situations. And I was just talking about BBC America, a lot of British television is purely based on awkward situations. And I think that the only way you could get away with that is if we turn to something else that was discussed once by the Monty Python guys, and that is arrogant freedom. Just the only way you could get away with that is if you developed what's called arrogant freedom, where you don't want to be liked, you don't want approval, you don't want to get along with anyone, you're just going to do things of your own choosing to entertain yourself and not care about how other people feel. But I believe that a lot of people that are attending seminars, like from this guy Julian, or just watching YouTube videos of that content, don't want arrogant freedom. They're actually trying to improve their social skills, not worsen them. But that's just my take on the subject. And this is a little bit getting away from serial killers now. And one final note on this particular subject relates to something that I heard on a program. I don't even remember the name of it. It was called something like the Danny and Tommy Show, something similar. And they said that trauma helps men and it hurts women. Trauma helps men and it hurts women. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing because, again, as somebody who talks regularly about serial killers on BlackBoxOnlineRadio, where do serial killers get this type of murderous animosity toward humanity? They get it from unhealed childhood traumas. They get it from traumatic experiences in their childhood. For the most part, of course, there are exceptions. And there are also people who have genuine psychopathic tendencies. There are people who also have some type of traumatic experience in their older years that drives them to go on and commit these types of crimes. And there are numerous serial killers that don't even start until very, very late in life. And I've gone through some of them here on this channel. I invite you to check out some of the older episodes. But with this concept of trauma helps men and hurts women, I mean, I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. And you might be thinking, they said it helps men. And when you talked about unhealed childhood traumas, well, those, of course, would be dealing with boys, not men. But at the same time, I have to push back on that because it's the same type of people, it's the same crowd that are going on and on about how men commit suicide at a higher rate than women. I mean, it's the exact same commentators in the same space on YouTube. They talk about this all the time, that women attempt suicide more frequently, but men commit suicide more frequently. I mean, the rate of suicide is higher among men, even though there are fewer attempts, because men are more likely to use more lethal methods, whereas women would perhaps use a method that is more or less not necessarily going to inflict as much pain. And I don't even want to say anything more than that because I don't want to delegitimize the suffering of anybody, or I don't want anything to be misinterpreted. But they talk about this all the time, about the differences in the way that men deal with these experiences. And where's that stuff coming from? It's coming from trauma. And trauma does not help men. And this whole thing about, what kills you, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. No, actually, I think we need to go back to Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight. And that's almost becoming a cliche at this point. Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight is just a generation's window into a world of different types of thinking. And what did he say? What doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger. And I think that there's some truth to that. Stranger, not stronger. Just, it affects people in a very different way, and sometimes it's for the worse. I mean, some people will have a traumatic experience, and they will learn from it, and they will grow from it, but they will still be affected. They will still be affected, and there's still going to be an aspect of suffering, usually. Maybe there's an exception that proves the rule, but with other people, there are also going to be these instances where adults, even men, have traumatic experiences, and it affects their lives very poorly. And again, I was just watching another video about this where somebody said that he watched his mother die in the hospital. It took 10 days for her to pass away, and getting divorced was even more painful, more emotionally painful than that. All right, I mean, people deal with traumatic experiences all the time in adulthood, male and female. And this idea that it's only helpful to one gender, I don't even think that it's necessarily helpful to anyone, because I more or less live by the rule of that if you have a bad experience and you learn from it, all that means is that you had the ability to learn to begin with. And that's not my own original statement, borrowed from pieces here and there from other commentators over the years, but I just think that it's so bizarre how people who are outside of the true crime world choose to view these particular topics. And I would like to move on to a different subject now, and this is going to carry on from something that was not connected to the previous recording. As I said, there's about 20 minutes that was done previously in between the packing of suitcases, and I actually took a flight from Boston, Massachusetts to San Francisco, the Bay Area, my second time in the Bay Area, although I didn't leave the airport. And on the plane, they didn't have any entertainment, and I had thankfully downloaded a movie called The Secret Agent, which is based on a novel by Joseph Conrad. And The Secret Agent could be a possible book that inspired the Zodiac killer, and this heavily relates to the Zodiac Unabomber connection, because it has been reported that Ted Kaczynski was a big fan of this book, The Secret Agent, and some people believe that the Zodiac killer and the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, were the same person. But I watched the movie, and I wanted to see, is there anything that is going to stand out as an influence on either serial killer? And my ultimate response was, the Secret Agent features a bunch of different stories, but there's actually this character that's played by Robin Williams, and he is uncredited. Like, he's not in the credits at all. I was like, wow, I didn't see his name at the beginning credits, and he also wasn't in the closing credits. And I just looked it up online, and he had an uncredited role in the movie The Secret Agent, which came out in 1996. And he is playing this character simply called the Professor, who was walking around with a bomb that he can detonate at any time, and he is trying to perfect it because he says that all he has to do is squeeze the detonator button. It's kind of like, almost looked like what we would call a stress ball or a squeeze ball. He just has to squeeze the detonator, and in 10 seconds the bomb will detonate. And he's talking to a different character, and the person says, 10 seconds? That's a lifetime. And he means that people could run away or that there could be interference. 10 seconds is a very long time. And he's continuing to have this discussion with the professor who has this bomb that he can detonate at any time. And he says, and I'm paraphrasing, I still don't know what you're all about. Because in the novel The Secret Agent, I mean the movie version I watched, they're talking about anarchist movements and socialist movements and who is right and who is wrong and the existing political structure. And there's just this guy that's carrying around this bomb, and someone says, I still don't know what you're all about. And what Robin Williams playing the professor says is, I'm just trying to create a perfect detonator. And I think that that is so telling of Ted Kaczynski. I think that reminded me so much of Ted Kaczynski. Absolutely, that is Ted Kaczynski. 100%, 110%. That the novel The Secret Agent, and I mean, I watched the movie version, but it's the same characters and ideas and the same message that is being shared. That sounded so much like Ted Kaczynski, because I've had the opportunity to discuss Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, with Mark Hewitt a few times. He is the author of Hunted, Profiled, and Exposed. Exposed is what really gets into the Unabomber Zodiac connection. There's also the Unabomber and the Zodiac by Douglas Oswell. And I mean, that sounds so much like Ted Kaczynski, because what Mark Hewitt said is that from an early age, Ted Kaczynski decided that he wanted to be a serial killer and that his primary function was to kill. It wasn't about endorsing any type of political movement. He didn't truly care about any particular political movement. His primary function was to kill. The same way that this professor just says he wants to create a bomb that can be detonated and kill people. It's detonating a bomb just to prove that he has the capability to do so. And I think that matches up very, very similarly with Ted Kaczynski. Now, with the Zodiac killer, not quite, because with the Zodiac did indeed threaten to use bombs. The Zodiac did indeed threaten to detonate bombs, and he has a bus bomb and all such, and the bus bomb got swamped out by the rain that they had a while back. But he is also more focused on going on kill rampages using other methods. He's not just simply saying that he wants to create a contraption that can bring death to a bunch of people. The Zodiac is also not even saying so much that he's trying to perfect a method for killing people. And I think that's a big difference. The Zodiac killer is already saying that he knows how to kill people. He's saying that he's done it before. The Lake Herman Road murders, the Blue Rock Springs shooting, Lake Berryessa, the Stein murder, and perhaps taking credit for other crimes, possibly the Snoozy and Furlong murders, taking credit for it. Although I do not believe that the Zodiac... And as I said at the beginning, I was hoping to use this as an opportunity to talk to you guys about the future of Black Box Online Radio. And I had stated in a previous Zodiac Killer news report that I was exploring some possibilities of doing more video with the show, like live streams, appearing on camera, but I have to give a shout out to the Black Pill Behemoth, who responded to one of my previous videos where I appeared on camera by saying that he likes the format of Black Box Online Radio. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I have to be honest to a certain extent. This has always been designed as a radio show. This has always been designed as a podcast. And there are so many differences between appearing on camera versus appearing in podcast format. And Black Box Online Radio has a real benefit where I can just show you the images of what I'm talking about. I mean, even some of the professional podcasters and people who have, very well done live streams where they're just only appearing on camera themselves without, the aid of visuals, it becomes a little bit difficult, to discuss crime scene photos without actually showing the photos. And it can be done on a live stream in the same way, but with BBOR, I mean, I can just provide an image and provide some commentary about it, but also the narration has to be done very differently because a lot of the changes in the show cannot be done necessarily, and some things might sound funny or they might sound entertaining in radio version or podcast version, but when they're done on video, it comes across very differently. So I'm not ruling it out 100%, but as of now, I have always wanted to do Black Box Online Radio in this particular way, and I think that it's going to stay that way for a while. I'm still going to try my best to get guests on in the future and do more interviews. There was another request for a return of the Zodiac Killer Channel's Interview with the Experts series, and my simple response was, I've been sitting here ready and waiting. I am always game to do the Interview with the Experts series. It's just that's done by the Zodiac Killer channel, which I have no ownership over, nor do I have any control over the creative direction. And yes, there were many plans to do things for that. It's just that for a while, the creators of the Zodiac Killer channel wanted to focus on the podcast serial killer Z to A, and I can understand that, but a lot of people have made requests for a return to the Interview with the Experts series, and I thought, well, as soon as I'm able to do that here on Black Box Online Radio, I'll have guests on and I'll just have discussions. And perhaps it'll go even beyond the Zodiac Killer mystery, also talking about Jack the Ripper and other true crime stories, and maybe even getting into some other things like historical mysteries. So there's a lot of ground that can be explored for BBOR. But I was just listening to an episode of Bulldog Mindset, which is hosted by John Sonmez, and he talked about how his channel puts out a short episode every day. They have long-form content, short-form content, and YouTube Shorts. And he shared some things about how it is difficult to create YouTube Shorts. And I just was like, oh my goodness, thank goodness. All things good and holy, yes. I'm so glad that somebody said that, because here on Black Box Online Radio, it of course takes more time to make a 1-hour podcast than it does to make a 1-minute short, but it is a very tedious process. And he was talking about having like 30 shorts in a month, meaning you have to do one every day, and at the beginning of the month, all of them have to be mapped out, because when I'm creating YouTube Shorts, there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes. It's more frustrating and nerve-wracking, and things have to be done in a very precise way, because there's only 1 minute to share an entire story or give commentary on something or to express an opinion or an idea, and it has to be very well organized. There's a quotation from Mark Twain that I'm going to butcher, where somebody asked him to speak for 15 minutes and he said, I'll need 2 weeks to prepare, but if you'd like me to speak for 2 hours, I can start right now. Paraphrasing once again, but that's the idea. Like, I can just sit here and I can talk to you guys for hours about any particular type of subject when there's no specific time limit. And it was Joe Rogan, of all people, who said that that's a true advantage that podcasts have over television, is they don't have to work with these specific time limits. It's an advantage over terrestrial radio, where they don't have to work with these specific time limits. But then YouTube, as well as other platforms such as Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, they're all going towards these reels and shorts that you have a time limit, and everything just has to be condensed. And I can do it. And sometimes I actually really like the end result. It's just, there are a lot of steps that have to go in there. There are lots of very specific edits that have to be done to the word choice. And I'm going to be doing something that I've never done before for Black Box Online Radio, and that's actually writing out scripts. Everything that you hear on BBOR is just open, free discussions. I mean, it's just me talking, and I'm just talking about something that I was curious about. But when I start doing more shorts in the future, I'm going to be adding on very specific words, and probably going to write something out, and then I'm going to have to cut it down, condensing everything into a minute. But please feel free to check out the shorts page, because especially here in the Philippines, that is one thing that I know that I can do. I was recording shorts last year. I mean, it was this year. I think of it as last year, the last time I was here in March, April, and May, and I did, numerous short episodes for Black Box Online Radio, and one of them that I made when I first came back to America was on the history of the Celtic cross, where it just had music in the background. And even though there's some imperfections in that video, that was one of the things that I am most proud of. And I know that nobody would probably think that except me, because it looks kind of weird in the YouTube format, but just the way that certain images lined up with the music, and I was just thinking, I really liked that episode. And I get those experiences from time to time here on Black Box Online Radio. But some other things that you can look out for will be a future reading of some of my writings. I've talked to you guys a lot about how I wanted to do an audiobook version of Down the Dark Lane, 3 Thrillers from the Motel, which was my second book. But I was just flipping through my own paperback copy of Killer on a White Horse, my first book, and I was just wondering, would I just want to begin from there? Just put the whole thing out as an audiobook online for free, simply because I think that it might be a nice addition to the White Horse Killer saga. And somebody once called me out for selling for-profit books on a true crime channel, and at the very same time I was talking about releasing an audiobook for free. And I have to be very blunt about something. When you're putting out Kindle Direct published books on Amazon.com, there's not a lot of money in that, and it's certainly not something that you can ever do extensively for profit, extremely for profit. And mostly, I put Killer on a White Horse out simply because I had a manuscript written from a fiction competition, and it was a possible avenue. It was something that I could use it for. But yeah, releasing that as an audiobook might be something in the cards, and I'll keep, putting out polling questions, see how you guys respond to things. And I also just want to make use of the time that is available now and talk to you guys about other true crime stories, and getting a regular Tuesday segment, a regular Thursday segment, and trying to release shorts 7 days a week. But it's going to be a challenge. I'm not going to lie, it's going to be a challenge, and it might be even a little bit nerve-wracking at some point, but I am all for this. So once again, you hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. You can also go through some of the links in the description box. Check out Killer on a White Horse first, and then maybe there'll be an audiobook version. You can also visit buymeacoffee.com/blackboxnid88. And I really appreciate all of the supporters out there who have, especially the people who are contributing regularly. You can also use the super thanks on YouTube, which is something that people also choose to do to make donations or contributions to help support the show. And that will be all for me now. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And Facebook and Instagram are going to be the places where these short episodes are also going to be released. On the Facebook Reels and Instagram Reels page, BlackBoxNet88. You guys know it, and I'll see you over there. Goodbye.